Hi, and welcome back to U.S. History with me, Mr. Snyder. Today we finish up U.S. history as we know it, 2001 to 2008, the George W. Bush presidency. Learning targets today, we're going to talk about how the 2000 presidential election goes. It's one of the biggest in U.S. history. There's lots of controversy, and we'll talk about the Supreme Court's decision in that. We'll discuss Bush's domestic policy. We'll talk about the impact of the terrorist attacks on 9/11, and we will talk about Bush's second term into 2008 presidential election and the recession of 2008. So the election of 2000 pits George W. Bush versus Bill Clinton's vice president, Al Gore. And the problem here is that neither candidate gets the 270 electoral votes needed to win because it's so close. Al Gore is at 266 and Bush is at 245, 246, somewhere around there. So whoever gets Florida's 25 electoral votes is going to have enough to win the election, but the vote is so close that they need to recount every vote by hand. And here's the confusion over some of the ballots. So you can see that Democrats on the left are the second one down, so a lot of people voted the second hole. But that was actually casting a vote for the Reform Party on the right. And this was supposed to be a way so that the large senior population could see the ballot easier, but instead it just created a lot of confusion, and it's known as the butterfly ballot. So finally, this comes down to a Supreme Court decision, and a very close one, in a 5-4 decision, because we're getting into the early part of December. This has taken over a month to decide. The Supreme Court rules that the constitutional recount cannot happen in the time remaining before we need to move on with this process. And so the problem is the recount that they're doing is unconstitutional, and we can't do a constitutional one in the time that's remaining. The unconstitutional one means that different standards were being applied from ballot to ballot, precinct to precinct, and county to county on how to count what are called undervotes, or votes that did not have a preference for president, maybe they did others, and overvotes, ones that maybe they pushed Gore, or they penciled in Gore, and they wrote Gore's name down, so they technically voted twice, so they have to throw it out. This gives the election to Bush because he was the state's original winner by only 327 popular votes. So even though Gore wins total more popular votes across the nation, more people in this country wanted Gore to be president than Bush. Bush is elected president because he wins the Electoral College. This is only the fourth time in U.S. history and the first time in recent history that the winner of the election does not win a majority of the popular vote. And it just comes down to the numbers of states you win. So Bush's domestic agenda can be summarized in three things. The No Child Left Behind Act, which basically penalizes schools that do not meet federal standards, and they'll get federal funding pulled. So that is a hindrance to school. A lot of people do not like that throughout the next decade. Tax cuts, $1.3 trillion would stimulate the economy after the recession in 2000. And Bush also extends Medicare to cover prescription drugs because a lot of seniors, the prescription drug prices were rising. A lot of seniors were confused by it, but it was very expensive. It adds to our national debt. It's very confusing to seniors, and there are a lot of loopholes and inadequate coverage in the system. So still, Medicare, not a very good system, even though Bush, his heart was in the right place. Let's say that. Then we get to the 9/11 attacks, where 4 airplanes are hijacked by Arab terrorists and crashed into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and Flight 93, United 93, fought back against the attacks. That plane was headed towards the Capitol building, but they end up crashing it into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. So the blame for this attack is placed on the al-qaeda terrorist network, and that is led by Osama bin Laden, who we've been learning about and who led the Mujahideen in Afghanistan in the 1980s against the Soviets with U.S. support. And Osama bin Laden was captured and killed in a raid in Pakistan in 2011. So al-Qaeda trains in Afghanistan, and they're given safe haven there by the party in charge of the government, the Taliban. So the Taliban is a government, al-Qaeda is a terrorist network. In response to this, in October of 2001, the U.S. invades Afghanistan to push al-Qaeda out of their strongholds and overthrow the Taliban government, and we're very successful with that. Although we remained there for a decade after 2014, we still have a presence in Afghanistan. The war on terrorism at home, Bush and Congress passed what is called the Patriot Act, because one of the complaints about not stopping 9/11 was not having enough power to. So this gives law enforcement officials broader power to monitor suspected terrorists, and they get to deem who is a suspected terrorist. So critics of the Patriot Act say that it infringes upon people's rights. So we have to come to a fair balance between a person's civil liberties versus security. For example, if you're a suspected terrorist, they can search your house without telling you about it or without giving you a warrant and notify you no longer than 30 days in advance that they searched your house. That's one of the most controversial provisions of the Patriot Act, since that violates your Fourth Amendment. We also create the Department of Homeland Security, so that brings us up to 15 cabinet-level positions that advise the president, and what they do is they coordinate security matters among state, federal, and local agencies, because another complaint on 9/11 was there wasn't good enough communication between local officials responding to the disaster, state officials, federal officials. So now Department of Homeland Security helps coordinate those matters. Then in 2003, we launch Operation Iraqi Freedom, because the U.S. intelligence and United Kingdom intelligence, they're our buddies in this, they believe that Saddam Hussein is stockpiling nuclear weapons of mass destruction, or WMDs. The UN weapons inspectors are sent in, or the United Nations. They don't find any, but we invade Iraq before they are allowed to continue searching, because Iraq only allowed them to search in certain places. So Saddam goes into hiding, we invade Iraq, we make it to Baghdad, we topple the Ba'ath Party government, and Saddam is then captured later on and executed in 2006. And U.S. forces finish operations in Iraq and help establish the new Iraqi government and withdraw in December of 2011 with a total of 4,487 U.S. troops killed and over 32,000 wounded in this military operation that lasts, 9 years, about that time. So Bush's second term, he wins the 2004 election because Kerry is seen as what they call as a flip-flopper on issues, and so he doesn't have a firm stance. But Bush has to deal with the growing budget deficit from the war. We're up to like $6 trillion, $7 trillion. Wow, we're at $17 trillion currently. The UN determines through investigations that Saddam never had nuclear weapons or the materials to make them. So that triggers investigations at home and accusations that Bush actually misled the American people and Congress about the weapons of mass destruction to win support for the war and go over there and get easier access to oil, although oil prices skyrocket during this time. And then Bush's poor, slow government response to Hurricane Katrina in 2005, which a lot of it really wasn't his fault, but people still blame him because he's the president. Then we get to the 2008 presidential election, one of the biggest in history, because it pits two people who were not a part of the previous party's regime in the administration. So none of Bush's people, Dick Cheney's too old to run for president. So we have John McCain versus Barack Obama. The important issues are the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the economy, the healthcare, and foreign policy. Barack Obama wins and becomes our 44th president and the first African-American president. And then right around election time, the banking crisis begins. And banks were living off of credit and issuing risky bank loans, along with a decline in American home values and an increase in the amount of debt that Americans are holding, all start the Great Recession in 2008. And 2009, 2010 really wasn't a good time to be in the American workforce. High unemployment, that's when yours truly graduated. So December 2007, 2008, not a good time to get a job. And so that brings us up to the end of U.S. history, but it's being made every day, so there's going to be a lot more. Be sure to watch current events, fill out your learning targets, bring them back to class, and I will see you later. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.